Hey, good evening. This is RFC Monkey, and I'm presenting you my latest video derived from Birds of Steel, the fighter pilot game based on Xbox 360. And after reading a little bit on the forums recently, I was trying to figure out exactly what I wanted to do with this video. I started off creating a historical offline battle, attempting to recreate the first kills by a hurricane squadron in Malta on January 9th, 1941, in which number 261 squadron took off in the morning. Historically there were 5, I modeled 4 of these, and took off to intercept a flight of Italian Mach-E 200s. I couldn't find exactly how many there were, so I modeled 6 coming in, and I'm flying the lead Hurricane in this mission. Now originally I was thinking about doing this purely historical, or at least historically inspired, but somebody from the Birds of Steel web group decided that it would be really cool if some people who make videos could provide some instruction on how to do combat fighting and maybe some videos on what to do. Unfortunately, I'm really not that good. If you had just seen my recent score for my last online game, I actually got beaten by the AI. I was sitting at the bottom of the table. So I'm really not that good at combat fighting. So what I thought I would do instead is, rather than tell you what to do and how to do it, I figured I would try to make this as a way of telling you, or as a way of reviewing what I did and pointing out my mistakes, hoping that we could all sort of avoid these kinds of mistakes in the future. So in a sense, what I'm doing is a post-flight battle report, looking over what I did wrong. Now in this particular mission, I managed to not get shot down. So at least I did one thing right, managed to return to home base. But for the moment, I want to talk a little bit about what I was doing right. Now, I think historically, I'm not entirely sure about this, but I think historically the British unit was flying the Hurricane 1, and in this mission I selected the Hurricane 2. Now the Hurricanes are really finicky planes as far as I'm concerned. They stall out rather quickly, and I seem to have a habit of perhaps tilting it too much, flooding the radiator and shutting my engine off. So one has to be very careful about how one flies these kinds of planes. When I fly Birds of Steel missions, I really prefer the immersive aspect of the game, and so I always fly in cockpit view. I like the outside view for takeoffs and landings when I'm watching the videos, but I always fly in cockpit view. I know it's restrictive. There's a lot of things you can't see under your nose, and you've got to look around in order to spot the enemies. I'm also flying in a custom simulation mode. That is, I'm flying with just about all of the simulation difficulties on, including unmarked enemies, real damage models, stalls, and I don't remember whether or not I had blackouts and redouts turned on for this one. I may have left those off for this mission. But in this case, I have a series of unmarked enemies, and that for me, that always seems to cause troubles. As I've mentioned in previous videos, I reconfigured my controller. I'm using the Xbox controller, but I reconfigured my controller to the alternate setup and modified that a bit so that I can use my right stick for looking around, which is critical in simulation-type battles, and my left stick for controlling pitch and roll. And I've got my left and right buttons as my rudder. Now you can see I've already managed to engage a series of enemies, and at this point I've probably made my first mistake. I blew through the enemies, and I'm going to make this mistake over and over in this mission. So here I am trying to catch up to a bunch of guys, and at this point they're already reversing back on me. I hesitated on that shot, unclear as to whether that was a Hurricane or a Mach-E. At this point I didn't even know what the paint scheme of the enemies was. And as soon as I passed them, I reversed. You can see a bunch of planes sitting back behind me. But by the time I make my reverse, everybody else seems to be reversing back towards me, making it quite difficult for me to figure out who's what. So perhaps my first, there I am shooting at my own Hurricane. That was a bad mistake. Let's call that mistake number 2. But mistake number 1 is not extending a bit past the furball and using my extension in order to try to gain some space that I can approach the enemy and see what's going on. And so what you find is a constant sort of zipping back and forth, everybody sort of blowing past each other, reversing, firing, and so on. And that's really not very productive. It leads to a lot of head-on shots, which makes it difficult to know where the enemy is And unless you're lined up just right, you don't get a good shot off. And in case you do, you run the risk of running head on with the enemy. So error one is engaging in sort of quick back and forth set of missions. I think I was trying to count on my Hurricane to turn quickly, maybe outturn these Maki. Whenever I've flown those Maki, I really shut down the engines all the time, and I really can't seem to manage to control those guys. So maybe the AI know a trick I don't know. Now at this point, I've got one enemy in my sight, doing some quick shots off the side, and I did manage to score an engine hit. You can see the black smoke coming out of there. And I thought maybe this guy was damaged. He pulled kind of a dummy move there, wing overed, went down. Here I am staring out the window looking for the kaboom. There should have been a marvelous kaboom, and it didn't happen. So I fell for this guy's trick. He went down, looped up the other side. In fact, you can see him just off my port wing there, having risen back up and around. So I fell for that trick and lost track of my enemy. At this point, I'm attempting to move onto some guys up ahead. You can see the small dots, looking to see what they are. And I don't know where the smoking guy is just yet, but I did score a few hits. There he is in front of me again, and as we pass each other, I go for a few hits, but smartly, rather than attempt to finish off the kill, I'll give myself credit that time, I did lift up my nose and let the guy pass under me. We can call this error number 3 right here, or maybe even error number 4, that I just stalled out just a bit. There's that smoking guy again, but I'm low on energy, and yeah, go ahead and stall a second time. Little too eager to turn with that guy, and I lost him. And here's one of the things I really enjoy about Birds of Steel at the moment is that that sunlight is really, this is early morning sunlight, that sunlight is really causing glare, making it difficult to see, which is exactly what you'd expect. There's at least one plane down on the ground. I don't know who that is. And here I am attempting just to spot any enemy and get a few hits on them. It's pretty sad at this point. A couple of minutes have gone through in the battle, and I have yet to really get a good hit on anybody. Well, one good hit on one guy, but haven't downed anybody for sure. My hope is that at some point, that one hit that I got was going to, that guy's engine was going to kick off, and maybe I'd eventually sort of get unofficial credit for the kill. There I am diving down in order to pull up some smash, trying to get behind these guys. And I get lucky because there's a Maki pulling in right behind one of my own guys who's behind enemies. So here's a Maki that I can try to get a few hits on. Again, you can see the challenge of firing under my nose blindly. I've got my convergence set to about 100 meters in this case, and I'm still having trouble finding the exact distance. I'm having trouble with the sight here, trying to figure out exactly what distance I should hit this guy. He flies low to try to evade me, and I pull down my throttle in order to stand his tail. I have no idea if any of these shots are hitting him. In theory, they should be. A couple at least machine gun hits should be doing something to him. Well, that last batch right there went right under him. But he pulls a wing over and dives away. I'm able to follow along. He's going to come under my plane. And here's the value of using that look around feature. He goes under. I get a little bit blinded by the sun. And I think at this point I've lost him. I'm tracking this guy that's right in front of me. And in just a moment, I can pull up and I'll be on the tail of another Italian Maki again. So the dogfight's taken its toll. You can see a couple guys behind me already on the ground. I have no idea whether my wingmen are alive or dead. There's a couple guys behind me. And this is yet one more thing that I've been trying to work on, is flying without crashing anything and keeping track of what's going on behind me, because typically these AI, once they get on your tail, they stay on your tail, and they're really difficult to shake. So I'm trying to keep my tail as clear as possible. There's one plane below me. It looks like that's a Hurricane. And I'm still circling, trying to find an enemy. This again is a Hurricane, and the reason I'm not firing is because I know that this is a Hurricane, and I'm just trying to take advantage of the fact that maybe he knew where somebody was to go after. Now what I've just pulled here, I've just pulled in front of my own wingman in order to steal his kill. If this were an online game, I would never do that. That's really dirty pool and dangerous. But in this case, the wingmen steal my shots all the time. So I figure since they're all AI, it doesn't really matter. So I'll come in, land on this guy, following him around. I've got the moves on him. He's ahead of me, and there he is silhouetted against the edge of the water, lined up right in my reticle. And at this point, I can take a couple shots, hopefully get something on him. He's doing some evasive maneuvers. I've got these guys set on basic difficulty, but that time managed to blow his wings out, and I always enjoyed looking back behind me. He bailed out to save himself, but the plane hits the ground with a satisfying thud. I think what happened at this point, that first guy that I hit, that I smoked, I believe that he did eventually crash, and I was credited with a kill. Now, the mission victory requirements for this mission are that you down 2 enemies. There were 6 enemies. I believe at this point there's at least 2 enemies still alive. But because I was awarded the victory for killing 2 enemies, the other 2 fled, headed north. I just gave a look back to where they were, and I've accepted the mission bonus at this point, which is to land back at my airport. Now, Malta, apparently, and I'm still learning about this historically, but apparently Malta was a big target for first the Italians, and eventually when the Italians couldn't manage to do this, for the Germans, because it did house a number of airports. And in this game map, there are 3 Malta airports. The first of which I'm passing down here. This is kind of a cool one, very short runway. Taking a look at it and seeing what I can see. So that runway is not the runway that I'm going to be landing at. I thought about doing a little sightseeing trip just to show off how cool this map is. I love the cockpit, especially in the offline game modes when you can see you're in pilot messing with stuff. Off to my left is the second reason that Malta was such an important port in the early part of the war. This one actually has a port for a large number of ships. That became a huge objective. That area of the map is a lot of fun to fly around. I didn't have a dogfight there, so I left it alone. And just near there, like right off my nose, is the second of the 3 airports, again with a fairly short runway, not one that I'm going to be landing at. The third one is not that far away. And actually, what's really funny about this game is that despite the fact that probably all 3 of those airports are mine, they all belong to the Royal Air Force at this point, if I land at the wrong airport, I don't get credit. My apologies at this point. When I was recording the playback, I guess not pressing any buttons long enough in the TV made the screen turn dark as part of the screensaver, so I get a little weird effect at this point. And it took me a second to realize what was going on. There we go. Turn the lights back on. And I'm just getting ready to approach and land at the 3rd airport. Now, landing in this game is probably the hardest thing. And actually, landing is the reason why I'd be terrified to fly a real airplane. But I've come in really low. My speed is really slow. You can see the lights click on my cockpit. I just lowered and locked my wheels. I've got my wing flaps down, and there's some of my co-pilots or my wingmen flying along with me. Switch to outside view so you can actually see it wasn't that bad of a landing. Not too much bounce. Got my front 2 wheels down. Let it roll for a bit to slow myself down. Using the rudder there to try to make sure I stay on the runway. And eventually gravity's going to drop my tail wheels down. And so all in all, I guess this was a very successful mission. I wound up with 1 confirmed and 1 almost confirmed kill. The game confirmed it, but I didn't actually see it happen. And so, which actually was exactly what happened to one of the first pilots in this game. So, success. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to making another video. Cheers.